Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth session of GEA. This session is about Plato's virtue ethics. In the previous session, we learned that ethics as a branch of philosophy is subdivided into three general subject areas, namely meta-ethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics. I'd like you to know that GEA, as far as the way I teach it, will focus both on normative ethics and applied ethics. That is why, for this session, we shall discuss first normative ethics, particularly the virtue theories of Plato. So the contents of this presentation are the following. We shall discuss Plato's life and legacy, Plato's concept of body and soul, Platonic character types, Plato's allegory of the cave, and Heidegger's Plato's doctrine of truth, all in relation to ethics. So who is Plato? Or what are some of the basic information about his life? Plato was born in 427 before Christ era. There's a question mark there because some historians say that it's not 427 but it's 428. Nevertheless, he lived about 200 years after Pythagoras. And his real name was actually Aristocles, but his wrestling coach dubbed him Platon on account of his robust figure. Plato is a son of a wealthy Athens family, and he served in the Athens army during the Peloponnesian War. Plato was actually a student of Socrates, in which Socrates made a great influence in the way Plato thinks. Alongside with his mentor Socrates and his student Aristotle, Plato helped to lay down the foundations of Western philosophy and science in general. After Socrates' death, he decided to devote all his energies to philosophy. And after traveling a while, he returned to Athens and founded a school named as the Academy, which is now known as the first academy in the Western world. And among the most famous of Plato's works was the Republic, from where the famous allegory of the cave is taken from. Now, what's the task of Plato? Plato actually had an intense interest in ethical questions. And Socrates' faith also taught him that good people will not survive unless society itself is reformed. Now it's good to recall the story of Socrates as far as his death is concerned. It can be remembered that Socrates was accused of impiety and corruption of the mind of the youth. When we say impiety, this refers to the disrespect to the gods, because during the time of Socrates, he was introducing an entirely different idea of a god, different from the Athenian gods, and so he was accused of impiety. Likewise, Socrates, during his time, he was also accused of corrupting the mind of the youth because he's trying to question the current state of affairs. And because of these two charges, Socrates was charged and became a subject of manhunt. The Athenian government hunted him, and he was caught, and he was punished to drink the hemlock. The hemlock is a poisonous plant in which if you drink the extract of this plant, you will eventually die. And that's the punishment that was meted upon Socrates. And so, because of the teachings of Socrates, he was punished to drink the poison of hemlock. And though Socrates had the chance to escape, because some historical accounts said that some followers or some students of Socrates bribed the guards which guarded him, but Socrates did not escape from being imprisoned, and he faced the charges that have been charged against him. And so he drank the hemlock, which served as his punishment for impiety and corrupting the minds of the youth. And so he died. He met a death that is not what he expected for. And so because of Socrates' death, Plato concluded that good people, just like Socrates, will not survive unless society itself is transformed. And so because of the life and death story of Plato's teacher, who is Socrates, Plato was awakened to the reality that we have to transform first the society, and in transforming society, we would need ethics. And so that's why Plato said that his task is to develop a kind of philosophy, to develop a kind of ethics that would transform eventually the society that we live in order for everyone, especially the good people, to survive and to live a good life in the society. Therefore, political philosophy was also a major concern in Plato's works alongside with ethics. Now we first take a look at Plato's concept of body and soul. Plato's concept of body and soul has influenced so much Christianity's perspective or view of body and soul. In other words, Plato's concept of body and soul has influenced the way Christianity as a religion views body and soul of man. The body is said to be material. It is composed of flesh and bone. We can touch it. While the soul is immaterial, it is spiritual. The body also cannot live and move apart from the soul. Meaning to say, the body doesn't have a life of its own because it is being dependent on the soul, and the soul, on the other hand, can exist apart from the body. And the body, since it is material, it is also mutable, meaning to say it is subject to change, while the soul is immutable. And the body, since it is material, it is composed of flesh and bone, it is destructible, while the soul, since it is spiritual, it is indestructible. Now, Plato believes that the soul existed past before the body. He says the gods made the soul prior to the body and more venerable in birth and excellence to be the body's mistress and governor. If we compare the body and soul, Plato is saying that the soul is more venerable and more excellent compared to the body, because as we said, that the soul can exist without the body, but the body cannot exist apart from the soul. And the soul being immutable and being indestructible, indeed, the soul is more excellent and more venerable. And this argument makes Plato conclude that man is a soul using a body. Now further, Plato analyzed the parts, the function, and location of the soul. Now, Plato believes that the soul has three parts. First part is the appetitive part. Now, the appetitive part is located in the stomach, particularly in the abdomen. So the function of the appetitive part is it drives man to experience thirst, hunger, and other physical wants. Meaning to say, if you feel thirsty, or if you feel hungry, or if you feel sleepy because we're tired, it's the appetitive part of the soul that dictates us to drink when we are thirsty, to eat when we are hungry, and to take a rest when we are tired. Now, the second part of the soul is the spiritual part. Now, the spiritual part is located in the chest, specifically in the diaphragm. Now, what's the function of the spiritual part? Now, the spiritual part makes us assert and experience hatred and anger and all sorts of emotions. If we are happy, or if we hate someone, or if we are angry at someone, it's because of the functioning of the spiritual part. The last part is the rational part. The rational part of the soul is located in the head, particularly in our brain. Now, the function of the rational part is to enable us to think, reflect, conclude, reason out, and analyze. Of the three parts of the soul, obviously, it is the rational part of the soul which is most excellent, because its function is to think, reflect, conclude, reason out, and analyze. Now, what is the main point of Plato with his concept of the parts, location, and function of the soul? Here are his points. The rational part of the soul is the highest and most important part of the soul. It is the part that distinguished man from other brutes or animals. And man can control the desires of his appetite and dictates of his spirit by using his reason or ratio. When animals go hungry or go thirsty, and if there is water and there is food in front of them, they don't anymore think whether it's safe to drink that water or eat that food. But man, when he or she goes hungry or go thirsty, when you offer him a food or a glass of water, there is a tendency for man to analyze and to think first whether it's safe to drink that water or it's safe to eat that food. And that is a clear evidence of the rationality of man, that man can think. Or when we are angry at someone, or when we hate someone because he or she did something so terrible, do we immediately kill that person out of hatred and anger? Some people do, but for most of us, we first think of the repercussions. We first think of the consequences of our actions. Now, if I'm angry and if I hate this person, I should have wanted to kill this person, but if you kill that person, there is a tendency for you to go to prison. And so, you now have a second thought of whether to kill or not kill that person. And that is an evidence, that is a sign of our rationality. That is a sign of the functioning of the rational part, that we may have appetites or we may have desires of our senses, and we may have negative emotions. We have the tendency to hate and to feel angry at someone. But since we are rational beings, since we are rational animals, we have the capability to control everything by using reason. We have the capability not to be governed and not to be dictated, not to be totally influenced by the desires of our appetites or our senses and by the dictates of our emotions. And we are aware that if we follow all the time the desires of our appetites or desires of our senses and the dictates of our emotions, there's a possibility that we will ruin our life, or there's a possibility that our life will go into chaos. And so that alone is an evidence that in fact and indeed we are rational animals, and we have the capability to let the rational part of the soul rule over the appetitive part and the spiritual part. And what Plato after all is trying to say is only when man's reasons has controlled both his appetite and spirit that he will have an ethical life. Ethical life is obtained when we let the rational part of the soul take control of our life. Ethical life happens when we don't let the desires of the senses and the dictates of our emotions, when we let the appetite or the dictates of the appetite and the dictates of the spirit be controlled by reason. Now we move on to the 5 Platonic character types. Now, of the 5 character types, only one is absolutely and ultimately ideal, which is the philosopher king or ruler. The 4 surrounding character types, the trimarchic, oligarchic, democratic, and tyrannical character types, they are not purely ideal because, as we will see later on, these character types are a combination of something pleasant and something unpleasant. For example, let's take a look at trimarchic character. A person with trimarchic character has these traits. He or she is driven by spirit. Again, spirit refers to the spiritual part of the soul. The function of the spiritual part of the soul is to enable us to feel all sorts of emotions. And a person with trimarchic character is driven by spirit or driven by emotions. He or she is energetic, competitive, self-assertive. However, he or she can be insecure, jealous, vain, and self-inflating. Meaning to say, he or she has a high regard of himself or herself, or he believes or she believes so much of his or her own capacity, and then fearful of falling behind. Moreover, the oligarchic character has these traits. He or she is driven by appetite. Unlike the trimarchic character a while ago, which is driven by spirit, now this time, the oligarchic character is driven, a person with oligarchic character is driven by appetite or by the desires of the senses. He or she is frugal, or in our vernacular, ilot, or tihik. And then he or she is hardworking, materialistic, and oftentimes money-hungry, dissatisfied, internally disturbed, dirty, and rich opportunist. Now the third character type is the tyrannical character type. This person is possessed by master passion with criminal personality, totally undisciplined, least self-sufficient, and anxiety-ridden. They are always anxious. The fourth character type is the democratic character type. The traits are: they are versatile, easygoing, treats all passions and desires equally, but they are aimless, without principle, and torn apart inside. Now, we have seen that the four character types are not pleasant. They are not ideal. Only the fifth and the last character type is desirable, pleasant, and ideal. Now, this character type is called the philosopher king or ruler. People who have this character type have the following traits. They are enlightened. They are internally balanced, morally virtuous. That is, they are temperate, or they have a high sense of self-restraint. They can control themselves. They can control the desires of their senses, or they can control the desires of the appetite and the dictates of their emotions. They are courageous. They are wise. They are just or fair and objective. They are ruled by reason. You see that the philosopher king is not ruled by the desires of the senses or the desires of the appetite. Neither are they ruled by emotions, but they are ruled by reason. And they are careful to distinguish between appearance and reality. They can determine which one is good, which one is bad, which one is true, which one is not, which one is correct, which one is not. Now, as far as distinguishing appearance and reality is concerned, here are few examples. Now, the philosopher king or the ruler has the capability to distinguish between appearance and reality. They can distinguish persons who are true in reality and persons who are only seemingly true. They can distinguish good friends and fake friends. They can distinguish people who are only good at certain times. Another is right now, if we expose ourselves to the television, we see that some advertisements are overly exaggerated. We see advertisements about whitening soaps, whitening toothpaste, but we see that these are only exaggerations or distortions of reality. They are only appearances. One advertisement is this food chain, in which what they project in the advertisement is sometimes totally different from what and from how the product is presented in reality. And so we have to be careful to distinguish appearance from reality. We have to be carefully scrutinizing in the things that we see and hear, and distinguish which ones are only appearances and which ones are the reality. According to Niccolo Machiavelli, he said, and I quote, "Men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. All men have eyes, but only few have the gift of penetration." Another quote, as far as distinguishing appearance from reality is concerned, is this: "Sometimes the nicest people you meet are covered in tattoos, and sometimes the most judgmental people you meet go to church on Sundays." Meaning to say, some people may look so negative, some people may look so evil because they have tattoos. But having tattoos doesn't mean that these people are bad. And It doesn't also mean that people who go to churches on Saturdays or Sundays are good. Because some people who are religious, quote unquote, people who are observing the activities or the exercises in their churches, it doesn't mean that these people are all good. Some of these people may be bad. And so we have to be careful in distinguishing who are really good from people who are only pretending to be good. Now, the last topic that we shall cover in this session as far as Plato's virtue ethics is concerned is his allegory of the cave. Now, what is an allegory? An allegory is a piece of literature in which the character and the symbols used in the story have deeper meanings or have deeper representations. Let me read the allegory. Imagine prisoners who have been chained since their childhood deep inside a cave. Not only are their limbs immobilized by the chains, their heads are chained in one direction as well, so that their gaze is fixed on a wall. Behind the prisoners is an enormous fire, and between the fire and the prisoners is a raised walkway, along which puppets of various animals, plants, and other things are moved along. The puppets cast shadows on the wall, and the prisoners catch these shadows. When one of the puppet carriers speaks, an echo against the wall causes the prisoners to believe that the words come from the shadows. The prisoners engage in what appears to us to be a game, naming the shapes as they come by. This, however, is the only reality that they know, even though they are seeing merely shadows of images. They are thus conditioned to judge the quality of one another by their skill in quickly naming the shapes and dislike those who play poorly. Suppose a prisoner is released and compelled to stand up and turn around. At that moment, his eyes will be blinded by the sunlight coming into the cave from its entrance, and the shapes passing by will appear less real than their shadows. The last object he would be able to see is the sun, which, in time, he would learn to see as the object that provides the seasons and the courses of the year, presides over all things in the visible region, and is in some way the cause of all these things that he has seen. Once enlightened, so to speak, the freed prisoner would not want to return to the cave to free his fellow bondsmen, but would be compelled to do so. Another problem lies in the other prisoners not wanting to be freed. Descending back into the cave would require that the freed prisoner's eyes adjust again. For a time, he would be one of the ones identifying shapes on the wall. His eyes would be swamped by the darkness and would take time to become acclimated. Therefore, he would not be able to identify the shapes on the wall as well as the other prisoners, making it seem as if he's being taken to the surface, completely ruined his eyesight. This is taken from Plato's The Republic. If we are going to illustrate the allegory of the cave, it would be like this. So you can see the prisoners who are being chained, and their necks and their arms and their legs are all chained, making them see in one direction, which is the wall of the cave. And behind them, there are puppeteers who raise some objects, and far behind is a fire in which the fire reflects a shadow on the wall. And these prisoners have been accustomed to believe that these shadows reflected by these objects are real objects. And so that's how it is being illustrated. The prisoners are being chained, and what they consider as reality are the shadows. But we know for a fact that these shadows are only reflections of real things. And in the allegory or in the story, one prisoner was able to escape and was able to encounter a bigger and deeper reality outside of the cave. And so, what's the message of the allegory of the cave? Or what is the message that the allegory of the cave wants to convey to us? Now, we go back to the story. Now, I said a while ago that the allegory is a kind of story, a kind of literature in which the characters and the symbols used have a deeper meaning. Now, this story takes place in a cave, and the cave limits their perception of reality. And one prisoner was able to escape from the cave, and that prisoner who was able to escape from the cave was able to encounter the reality outside of the cave. Now, what does the cave represent? Firstly, it represents the human body. The body limits the soul to learn and explore the things. The soul has to be liberated from the body, just as the prisoner was liberated from the cave in order to encounter the reality outside. Now, what do the shadows represent? The shadows represent our ignorance. The shadows represent our limited knowledge. The shadows represent how limited our knowledge is. And so, the soul has to be liberated from the body in order to encounter the truth or the reality outside. Or the prisoners have to escape from the cave. And who teaches us these shadows, or who projects the shadows? It could be the society, it could be our family, it could be our religion. Our society, our family, our religion, they teach us certain things for us to believe. But the things they teach do not totally capture the entirety, or do not capture totally the truth and the reality. And so we have to realize that the things we learn in this world are not all the things there is in reality. There could be more than the things that we already know. Or what we do not know could be more than what we know. And what we know is never enough on earth. And so, the allegory of the cave is a perfect example of the idea in which we have to be liberated. We have to go beyond our ignorance. We have to free ourselves from the bondage of ignorance in order to see things clearly, in order to encounter the truth and the reality. We have to break the chains that limit us from seeing the truth. In fact, one verse in the Bible says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, what are these chains that limit us from encountering the truth? Again, based on what I said, it could be our culture, it could be our tradition, it could be what our parents teach us, it could be what education or what the schools teach, it could be what our religion or what our religious denomination teaches. And so we have to break through from this. We have to break away from these chains that limit us to encounter the truth. A postmodern philosopher further analyzed Plato's doctrine of truth, and that is Heidegger. And Heidegger analyzed the allegory of the cave, and he identified 4 stages. And this is how I represent the 4 stages. Stage 1, people live shackled inside the cave, engrossed in what they immediately encounter. Now, we may be spending years and years in school, and we may believe that we are learning enough. But Plato is saying, so too Heidegger is saying that what we learn is never enough. What we learn in this world is never enough. What the school is teaching is never enough. And so we have to move on to another stage. We have to recognize that there are things in life and in this society that are preventing us from encountering the truth. Stage 2, the chains that shackled one of the prisoners have now been removed, and he is now turning around the cave. So stage 2 is the point in which the freed prisoner have now removed the chains. So stage 3, the freed prisoner is now ascending out of the cave and gradually gazing upon the most unhidden, or now gazing upon the truth. And the last stage, the enlightened prisoner returns to the cave as a liberator. So from stage 4, after the freed prisoner encountered the truth and the reality outside of the cave, he returned to the cave as a liberator in order to free the other prisoners. And to me, that is the most beautiful moment in the allegory of the cave. When we become selfless, when we don't become selfish, when after we encounter the truth and the reality, we think of going back to the cave because we know that some prisoners are still left there. Some prisoners need help. So the most beautiful point in the story is when we encounter the truth, we think of sharing the truth to others. We don't hold the truth selfishly or for ourselves alone, but we think of liberating those prisoners inside the cave so that they too will encounter the truth. Again, to me, this is the most beautiful moment in the allegory of the cave, because after the freed prisoner has been enlightened, that prisoner could have opted to live a life outside of the cave, not minding of the prisoners that were left behind. But he never did that. He went back to the cave in order to liberate those prisoners. But that act, I consider that act to be a heroic one. It takes a hero to help others. It takes a hero to think as well of the welfare of others. It takes a hero to forget his own self and think of the welfare of other people. And so let me conclude with a personal quotation. Figuratively, each of us is holding a candle, waiting to be lighted by someone. The moment our candle is lighted, we automatically assume the responsibility to light other people's candles too. The process ought to go on and on until everyone's candle receives light. A light withheld is lightness deprived, and darkness perpetuated, but a light shared is lightness disseminated and darkness dispelled. By sharing the truth to others, we are like sharing the light from the candle to others. When we share the truth to others, we don't actually lose the truth. Similar to sharing the light to others, we don't lose the light, but rather we multiply the light much as we multiply the truth. And so the whole point of Plato's allegory of the cave is to endeavor or to do everything to replace ignorance with knowledge, to replace ignorance with truth. And once we encounter the truth, we are duty bound to share the truth to others so that they too will be enlightened, so that they too will be liberated from the chains that prevent them from encountering the truth. For your assessment, I'd like you to answer the following questions. First, what message does Plato's allegory of the cave try to convey to you? Second, based on Plato's allegory of the cave, what virtues should an ideal man or woman possess? And third, how can you apply Plato's moral philosophy in real-life situation? Where to submit? Output number 5. You firstly write your output in your notebook and then take a picture of your output and then submit the pictures to my personal messenger account. And a reminder to everyone, I hope at this point you have already changed your messenger account name to your real name so that it will be easier for me to identify your submissions. And as much as possible, make your answers brief or concise and refrain or avoid from having lengthy yet irrelevant answers. That ends session 4. Thank you for listening. See you in the next session.